Awesome, and hello everybody. How are we this afternoon? Hopefully you've been having a really good time here at this virtual conference. Before we begin, I wanted to go over a couple things here. Just in the chat window, you guys have probably gotten to be pretty familiar with this, but the chat window here and then next to the chat window is a polls function. And if you enter your question for the speaker, we have Captain Reed Lester on the line here who's going to be watching out for those questions, and he'll feed those to us at the end, and we'll see if we can get those answered for you. So we'll get started here. And by the way, you're welcome to chat away in the chat box, of course. That's totally fine. So today we're going to talk about experience management, and I like to title it the most important and yet overlooked aspect of member retention. And on the line with us today, so myself, I'm Major Michael Moore. I'm the recruiting and retention manager for CAP. And my assistant is Captain Reed Lester. He's assistant for National Headquarters. And then we also have Marie Voigt and Susie Parker on the line, who are just here to make sure that I don't get us in trouble. So we'll try to avoid that. But let's go ahead and jump right into this. You're always supposed to start a presentation like this with some kind of cool quote from somebody famous. And so my cool quote from someone famous is that if you fix your unit's retention problem, your recruiting problem goes away. And oh, hey, look who said that. It was me. All right. So I'm a legend in my own mind. That's okay. And what I want to introduce you to today is the idea of how our experiences influence the overall culture of CAP. And here's our problem defined. You know, Civil Air Patrol really has inconsistent member experiences, and those can have long-lasting and unpredictable influences on our culture. And so on the right-hand side here, I have some examples of some positive experiences. Let's start with the positive. You know, new member engagement. I think Civil Air Patrol does a really good job of engaging our new members, getting them involved. We have a Great Start program for cadets. We have email outreaches and our volunteer magazine. We have a lot of things to kind of try to draw members in and get them engaged. When it comes to training and development, we've got a brand new volunteer university system that has just come out. So a lot of effort and emphasis been put on training and development. We're always trying to do the best we can there, and some great experiences there. Cadet orientation flights, a super positive experience for cadets. Anybody who's ever been involved with that, it's really nice to be able to put a cadet into an airplane in an organization called Civil Air Patrol. We're the only youth organization that really has that as our mainstay. We do a great job with promoting our members and recognizing them. We have all kinds of awards available, from medals of life-saving and valor down to recognition for attending encampment, and even awards for recruiting members into CAP. We also have a lot of special activities and encampments all across the country. The International Air Cadet Exchange, Cadet Officer School, all the different familiarization courses we do during the summer, ES activities, like say summer encampments, winter encampments. There's a lot going on, a lot of great experiences of those, and much, much more. Now, let's flip the coin and look at a list of some inconsistent and negative experiences. And for those who are waiting for the slide to change, you'll notice that it did change, but yet it didn't. Because we also do a kind of a bad job when it comes to new member engagement. How many people have seen someone come to visit your squadron, or maybe you did when you first came to join, where you came into the squadron and nobody even so much as engaged with you or said hi, and you kind of sat there and maybe you made eye contact with a couple people? And at the end of the night, you're like, this seems like it's something I want to do, but I don't know because nobody really kind of reached out to you to bring you into the fold. And that's definitely a negative experience in that engagement. Training and development, I think everybody has stories that they can tell, or that they know of people who had difficulty getting the training that they needed. A real common complaint, for example, is pilots, who sometimes it can take up to a year for a pilot to get their Form 5 check ride so they can actually fly. And that's not a great experience for them. Cadet orientation flights, you'd think, well, that's a great opportunity, but there are a lot of negative influence, or a lot of negative experiences that happen with those, because sometimes they can be poorly managed or poorly organized so that the parents are confused, like, where do I go? When do I need to be there? When do I pick up my child? There are instances of cadets who were very uncertain and uneasy of what was going on in the process, and they may have had a bad experience in that regard. Obviously, there's things outside of our control that make for bad experiences, like weather and things like that too, but just be aware that, yeah, O flights can also be a negative experience for people. Promotions and recognition. I mean, there are people who sometimes go a long time, especially cadets. If someone's not watching out for them, I know many times where a cadet doesn't get promoted quote unquote on time. They're trying to work their way through the program, and for whatever reason, some kind of bureaucratic issue gets in the way, some glitch in e-services that doesn't let them get promoted on time. We also know, I'm sure all of us know of situations where someone did a great job, did something fantastic for Civil Air Patrol, and really didn't get recognized for it. And that's, again, negative experiences that we need to worry about. Special activities, while they are fantastic, the application process can be undaunting. The cost to attend them could cause for negative experiences. Sometimes, I know stories of things that have bad happened at experiences or at encampments and activities. We're not focused on that. I'm talking the actual experience of the process of getting there, or the experience of the process of participating. So with that, let's take a look at a case study so we can kind of think this out. And this is a real life case study. This actually happened a few years ago. And it's the case of the dead battery. Dun, dun, dun. And what it was is just, it's a CAP van, and a member volunteers to take a day off from work to go drop the van off at the dealership to get the oil change. That's really how this whole thing starts. And they go to pick up the vehicle and find out that the battery is dead, so they have to jump start it. And so then they go to the dealership, they turn it off, and then later, of course, they got to move the van around, and they realize the vehicle won't start. Now, it's pretty obvious at this point that it needs a new battery. That's most likely the cause. And for those who aren't aware, there's a corporate credit card system, and there's like a $500 kind of like basically expenses up to $500 are pre-approved. But the Wing Logistics Transportation, that's the LGT person here that you see in the story, they threw in some extra requirements that they had to have a diagnostic test of the battery to make sure that the battery was actually dead. And then they wanted an estimate, but not just an estimate, they wanted a written estimate for how much the battery was going to cost. And then they wanted their own approval before they would do any work. And so now you have this volunteer who's sitting with this vehicle that really just needs an oil change, and this other problem came up, and it should just be a quick and easy, yeah, put the battery in and let's go. But it didn't work out that way. And that logistics person wasn't available to answer, and the member eventually reaches out to the wing commander and says, well, what do I do? The wing commander says, yeah, it's $250. Go ahead and take care of it. And then the member gets scolded later by the logistics person because they didn't get their quote unquote approval. And so then you roll ahead a little bit later, and that member notices there's a CAP truck that needs new wiper blades. And so what are they going to do? They think about that experience they had in the past, and they say to themselves, forget it, I'm not going to go through that again. And they just pay out of pocket, and they take $40 out of their own pocket to donate to Civil Air Patrol to get those wiper blades. Now, hopefully nobody's ever experienced this before, but I have a feeling there's probably a lot of people on the line who've experienced this type of situation where the experience that you had overall just wasn't good, and it tainted your viewpoint. So let's take a look at how this culture works. This is a continuous evolution of CAP culture, and it starts at the very beginning of that orange box at the top, where members join CAP based on the perceptions that they get from the unit and the members and the activities. And those perceptions, it builds this idea in your mind of like, this is what Civil Air Patrol is about. And that's why people join Civil Air Patrol, is based on that perception. Now, that perception isn't always true because it can be distorted. You can have preconceptions. For example, I know somebody who wanted to join the military, and they had this preconception in their mind that it was going to be a certain way. And when they got there, it turned out to not be at all that way. So that preconception can be, or that perception can be influenced by that. So just be aware of that. And then we jump into the next sets of points in the circle here, and they're all blue. And you can see that all of these things, attitudes, values, decisions, expectations, and behaviors, these are all really things that you kind of self-realize, either because you're trying to drive to accomplish some kind of a goal, or sometimes they're driven by peer pressure. And this is not an area that leadership in CAP has a lot of effect. Now, we really do try. I mean, Civil Air Patrol has published core values to try to influence the values that people have. And we set expectations in what we expect of our members and our cadets. And we try to modify behaviors. When people behave positively, we reinforce that through awards and recognition. And we have negative reinforcement of that when people don't quite do the way they're supposed to, do things the way they're supposed to. But the main point to this is that this part of the cycle is all really internalized, self-realized, or peer pressure that affects this. So we jump over to experiences, and this is the key, and that's really what I'm talking about today. this is the one place in the cycle where leadership in CAP has the greatest chance to address the issue and fix it. Now, the reason that the experiences are so important is because after everyone has an experience, they tell a story. And if you think back to our incident with the van, you can bet that that member probably has a story that's not very pleasant, right? They're not going to say, gee, that was a great day. I got to take a day off from work to go do this thing for CAP. And not only did it take me all day, but I got yelled at the end of it. So those experiences, they filter into the stories that we tell. We tell those stories to people, positive or negative, and that feeds into the perceptions again. It's a constant feedback cycle. I'm sorry, I forgot to advance the slide, but here again, we just talk about the stories, their influence. And by the way, this slide deck is available for download in the download section there in the screen. So just to recap this cycle and just try to keep this in mind, because we're going to kind of go through this a little more, but remember that members join because of their experiences, their attitudes and behaviors are affected by this, then their experiences are the key point, and then they have stories. So just for example, let's take a look at this, like the idea of an orientation flight. I have the perception, because I've talked to other people, that this orientation flight is going to be a really good and exciting thing for me to participate in. That affects my attitude. I have a very positive attitude about this because it's going to be a lot of fun. And that changes my value because I know that this is going to be a fun activity and it's going to be valuable to me. So I'm going to make sure that I act that way. I make decisions towards the value of it with the expectation that I'm going to get something out of this that's going to be really fun. And by behavior, of course, I'm going to be on my best behavior. And then I have my flight experience. It's wonderful. And I tell everybody what a wonderful time it was. And it feeds back into the whole thing. Now, which situations does this cycle apply to? And really, this applies to any interaction you have at all with Civil Air Patrol. And this doesn't apply only to Civil Air Patrol. I mean, this cycle happens at home and school and other things as well. But any interaction you have, this cycle applies to it. How long does it take for the cycle to be completed? It kind of varies. I mean, it can take a long time. Maybe you join Civil Air Patrol and your attitude changes over time based on this as you kind of go through this. But if you think about the story of the person with the van and the dead battery, you can bet that this cycle went very quickly from a positive attitude to the feedback loop of being yelled at, which then spirals this thing into this person being very disgruntled and not somebody who's very excited about Civil Air Patrol. And so what can we do to bring about positive changes? And really it comes down to, you've got to identify the problems. You really have to look at your experiences in the program entirely. I mean, it's not just, I keep saying experiences. I don't want you to think that I'm talking about like going to encampment. I mean like the experience of signing up for encampment, traveling to encampment, your meals at encampment, your quality of sleep at encampment, those types of things. That all feeds into the experience. And what we need to do as an organization is to recognize that those experiences are not always positive. And when those negative experiences happen, we need to make sure that we're ready to raise awareness and say, hey, this didn't work the way it should have. And we need to take steps to look into this and figure out what's the best way we can fix this. Now, there's not always a fix, but oftentimes a tiny change can improve that experience overall. One key thing here is to identify specific weaknesses and failings in the process and not the people. One thing people tend to do is, something's wrong and you kind of yell at the person that's involved with it, and they tell two friends and they get upset with each other, and it's like you're attacking the person. So what we're trying to do with this is we're not trying to attack the person, we're trying to attack the processes and fix those. And what I implore people to do is to then think outside the box. As you're looking for ways to make your improvements, you got to think kind of not situation normal. You've got to think outside. What's a new way to do this? And most importantly for this page here is to not take it personally. If you're a person who is running a process or a program and someone comes to you and says, hey, we should consider tweaking a particular part of this so that we can improve the experience overall, don't get defensive. Remember that they're not attacking you. It's that they are trying to improve the process for everyone. I really do feel that 99.9% of the people in Civil Air Patrol do what they do here out of a sense of altruism and wanting to do what's right. And I really don't think that there are very many members that we have who are going around and literally just trying to mess up everybody else's day. I don't think that's it. I think everyone comes from a place where they really want to do the right thing. For example, that logistics transportation officer at the wing regarding the van, I think that person was trying to act in their best interest to protect the assets of CAP and make sure that everything is done appropriately, that we don't have any kind of unnecessary expenses. But those attempts on his part created a bad experience for others. So again, don't take it personally. And in experience management, really, you got to know that it's the smallest change that can produce benefits. Making sure that parents who are taking cadets to orientation flights know the schedule, that when the event's going to happen, that they know what time to pick up their child, that the child or the cadet knows what to expect. That all feeds into it. And if we can take that as a culture of continuous management, continuous experience management, then we can constantly be working towards making our experiences in CAP better. And so my recommendation is for commanders to appoint experience management teams. And this isn't a full-time, like we're doing this all the time focus. It's like an advisory group, that gets together maybe quarterly to sit down with your unit and say, how have things gone? How about that activity that we did, and how could we have made that experience better? Or what about how we issue uniforms, for example? Maybe there's some improvements that we can do there to make that easier for people. Or how do we make sure that we disseminate the Zoom link for people who are going to attend our meetings on Zoom, since that's kind of where we are for the time being. But the idea is that they should be meeting together regularly to just sit and deliberately look at and analyze how our experiences are being handled and what we can do to improve them. And last on this slide is just the idea that military experience really makes our Civil Air Patrol NCOs a great fit for this role, because that's what NCOs do in the military all the time. NCOs are always looking out for the welfare of their airmen, their seamen, their sailor or their soldiers. They're always watching out for what's in their best interest, and they are not going to hesitate to raise the red flag, if you will, when something doesn't meet with the experience that their soldiers or their sailors are supposed to have. So in a nutshell, that's really kind of it. And I want to spend a lot of time now answering people's questions about experience management and how we can do this. So let's go ahead and open this up and let's see what questions that people have.
How can we promote our superiors utilizing experience management more often in our squadron, group, wing level operations?
Well, besides tying them up and taking them out in the backyard, I think really if you constantly talk about it and push up through your own activities, when you have an after action meeting after your activity has occurred, and you tell people this is how it went, and these are the experiences we had, and this is what we can do to improve it. If you constantly push that up, then I think we can gain some traction on this.
Shelley said in the chat room, I hear feedback from the moms of the cadets. They feel their cadets are being disrespected when a senior cadet issues a drill command. I don't think it's actually the senior cadet doing anything wrong, but the perception of the cadet who didn't read the drill material prior to the meeting.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Read that one more time. I want to make sure I'm getting that. Stop sharing here. Follow along.
I hear feedback from the moms of cadets. They feel their cadets are being disrespected when a senior cadet issues a drill command. I don't think it's actually the senior cadet doing anything wrong, but the perception of the cadets who didn't read the material prior to the meeting.
Yeah, and I think it's also, if we think about the cycle, I think it's also just that the person, the parent doesn't understand the military model that we're role playing, I guess you could say. Therefore, their perception is skewed, like I said, how it can be affected from the outside. And so they don't have a clear understanding of what's going on. So when that cadet is giving that drill command and they're saying, forward march, and they're doing it very loudly, it's not like a personal attack towards anybody. That's just the way that it's done for the purposes of clarity of communication.
One person said, a lot of times we don't know what the negative experience was until that member goes away. Any ways we can address it before it's too late?
I am a firm believer of having after action sit downs and surveys of the people that participate in your activities. For example, we did one thing that we do out here in Washington Wing is we do a road march, 20-mile, 2-day road march. And at the end, everybody got a survey, and we really encourage those people to be open and honest. And it's an anonymous survey, so they can be candid to say, what did we do right and what did we do wrong so we can fix it. And so by soliciting that feedback is the only way you're going to get it, is to ask for it. If you expect that person to say, oh, I had a bad experience here, unless you build a culture of experience management where you are open to that, they're not going to volunteer that information.
At our squadron, we're a very young squadron, even our cadet leadership. How do we overcome this?
How I guess I'm gonna have to ask another question. How do you overcome managing the experience for a young squadron just by lack of experience?
Sounds like it.
Okay, so yeah, you want to definitely, you're gonna have to learn more experience, but you also would want to cross-pollinate as much as you can with other units. Hopefully there's other units nearby, or you can get on a Zoom meeting and learn from them ways to do things. But again, when it comes to experience management, your experiences are going to be awkward at times. And it's not just small units or new units. I mean, all units have things that happen that don't work the way they should have. So really just being open and honest about the fact that we are open to change and we want to make this better is a way to do that.
We have a comment about squadrons that have traditions and not wanting to change even though we've updated how we do things or recommendations for national.
Yeah, just doing something a certain way because that's the way you've always done it is probably the least effective way to get something accomplished. So you really have to attack that at the leadership level, at the highest level. You need to get buy-in so that the commander can say to people, I know that there are certain sacred cows, but we need to move away from that and do the mission. I've heard, where squadrons have certain things that they do that you just look at yourself and you're like, why? It makes no sense. And you really have to ask yourself, I mean, one thing I always challenge people to is if you're doing a certain action and you don't know why you're doing it, ask what mission in Civil Air Patrol does it fit into? And if you can't say that, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And what core value are you upholding by doing that thing? And if you can't fit that into one of those two things, then it's probably a tradition that needs to go away.
As leaders, when we know we've messed up and given someone a bad experience, how do we own up to our mistakes and move on?
Personally, I'm always an advocate of standing right up to everybody and saying, that didn't go the way that we planned it. And I apologize for that. And we're going to figure out what happened and we're going to take steps to fix that. Nothing is more effective than just being open and honest with people and just telling them that it didn't go as planned and we're going to make it better. And another thing you can kind of do, and I think, and that might be how I got the job that I'm in now, is that you can go after the people who complain the loudest and enlist them to help fix the problem. Because if they have very vocal complaints about something, they obviously have ideas of ways to make it better.
When we get a new member and they've been recruited based on something that's not true or not accurate, is there a way to keep them involved? And do you have any suggestions that, for instance, if somebody said, you're going to get to fly every single day and you'll be our main mission pilot?
Yeah, when somebody gets sold, a less than sincere, bill of goods, then we have to, as an organization, set that record straight. That's not how it's going to work. And again, we apologize. Look, that you were sold, a bad deal. And then try to do what we can to find a way to reach that person's goals. And you may have to have that person sit down and evaluate like what other reasons there may be that they want to continue to be involved, and get them focused toward that direction. But again, the first thing you do is come out and just admit it. And then obviously you have to stop that from happening. So part of your correction is going to have to be finding out who did that, or what their motivation was, and stop them from doing that in the future. I know a situation of a squadron that recruited like 80 members over the course of a very short period of time, basically promising them that they were going to get pilot training and have their pilot's license within a year. And of course, within a year, those 80 people were all gone because they had been sold, a bad story. We don't want to avoid that.
One person asked, how do we entice members to renew during this pandemic?
I did a whole nother session on that yesterday. And so I'd invite people to go back and look at that. But one of the biggest things to do is to engage them, get in contact with them and let them know that you're still here, that CAP still is here for them, and look into opportunities for what I call micro-volunteering, which is getting them to engage in some very small task that helps keep the squadron and CAP as a whole moving forward.
Right now, we have one very unmotivated cadet who has been in for almost a year. He hasn't promoted or gotten his uniform. How do we fix this?
Personally, I would probably sit down with that cadet and ask in an interview situation and maybe with their parent, what's going on? How can we help you? Because it may not be a lack of motivation. There's a whole bunch of things that could be going on. It could be a learning disability. It could be peer pressures. It could be, a million, things that are just going on. It might be that they just don't get the material or they don't have an interest in being there. So you really have to get to the root of what's lagging that cadet from progressing.
Do you think it's a good idea to recruit a parent with a child to serve in the same squadron?
Yes, with a huge caveat. I really don't think that your parent should have anything to do with cadet programs. Obviously you need parents to act as chaperones for activities and be involved in that regard. But wherever possible, it's really good to separate those and let the cadet be a cadet and let the parent be a senior member and do senior member stuff over here so that their cadet has a chance to grow. Otherwise, you have that situation of the helicopter parent, which is something we don't really want to have in CAP. But yeah, you can definitely recruit the both of them. Just make sure you have a separate program for each.
Brigadier General Dunn this morning in another presentation switched a quote, the one we've all heard that says, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care," and said, "No one cares how much you know till they feel how much you care." How responsible are our leaders for making this member experience their top priority?
I think it's a huge, responsibility for the command and for our members to develop a culture of experience management. We really need to look at this holistically because, you can't retain members if they don't have a good experience. And even in a COVID environment, there are ways to make the experience, we admit it's not good, right? But there are ways to make it fun and engaging. And as long as you can keep doing that and you be open and honest with your members, then you will retain them. But definitely you got to be open and honest, and show people what you want. You can't just say it, you've got to do it, right?
Absolutely. Natalie talks about how communication is always key, but we don't want to wait on senior members to volunteer or cadets to seek you out. We need to establish an open communication from the very beginning of the relationship.
I think cadets need to understand that the chain of command works both ways and that they aren't just to sit there like sponges and absorb everything around them, that they really need to participate in the activities and the events that they're part of. And there's ways to do that. So I think, again, going back to the idea of the culture, we really need to make sure we foster a culture where people feel comfortable doing that in an appropriate manner, of course. I mean, you don't want somebody in the middle of some formation at the passing review spouting off that this is a bad experience for me. And, obviously you don't want that, but the idea that they know they can communicate what is working, what isn't working.
Is there a set process for asking members what they want when they join, more than just the recruiting and retention officer?
Yeah, the thing about asking someone what they want when they join, it's kind of a double-edged sword because they don't necessarily know what they want because they don't yet understand all that CAP has to offer. And sometimes people, join and they want to do something different than what they're known for. So again, I know an example of an accountant who joined CAP and wanted nothing to do with finance, but was a great historian. But he didn't know that going into it until he got an understanding for the system. So not sure if I'm answering the question, but that's where I'm going with it.
And those are all of our questions.
Cool. Well, we've got a few more minutes. We can wait for a couple more. And then if we don't get any more, then we'll make this an early session. I know I'm kind of standing in the way of everybody's day. And I really want to say thank you to everybody on the East Coast in particular, because I know it's in the early evening there now. Lucky me, I'm out here on the West Coast where it's still mid-afternoon. So Marie or Susie, did you have anything that you wanted to add while we're here?
I just wanted to thank you, Major Moore and Captain Lester, for stepping up to lead the recruiting and retention team. This is such a vital part of CAP staying live and viable as we move forward. Hopefully, we're going to get back to those in-person meetings that everybody wants to do when the pandemic is over. but staying engaged in the meantime is really important. And we totally appreciate all your support and what you've done to work with everyone.
I'm glad to have done that in my role. I know Captain Lester's also eager. I'm putting words in his mouth. I know he just loves this job. And he's actually very interested in a program that we're looking into about, and what was it called again?
Volunteer.
Volunteer match. That's right. So you'll start hearing more about that in the upcoming sessions. So I do want to put a plug in here real quick for those who are in a recruiting and retention role. There is a Facebook group called CAP Recruiting and Retention Officers. And if you go ahead and search that on Facebook, you'll find it. And there's a couple of questions that you answer to let us know that you're actually a CAP member and not just some, spammer from some third world country, and it'll let you in there. And the whole idea is to encourage people to engage and discuss with recruiting and retention issues. So please do that. And if you're a cadet on the line and you say to yourself, well, Facebook's for old people, that's okay. You can still get a Facebook account and come join us there too, because the cadets are allowed. So again, that's a CAP Recruiting and Retention Officers. It's a group on Facebook.
We got another good question.
Sure.
Are there any recruiting videos that can be shown to new folks that explain everything better than we can do in person?
Wow, I wish. I've seen some pretty good videos out there, but with the changes recently, like in professional development stuff, it would all have to kind of be redone. And I know that my predecessors put some pretty good information out there about the membership process as far as getting people in, but I don't think we have a catch-all set of videos that we could put out there. So if anybody out there has the wherewithal to do video, production, let's collaborate and put something together.
Major Moore, if I have just a second, I was going to
Yes,
say,
ma'am.
It's difficult to do a recruiting video like that or an onboarding video because every unit seems to have a different focus. We always tell the prospects that when they contact national headquarters. Every unit has a different focus. Every unit has different activities they do. So what you guys might be doing in the Pacific Northwest, vastly different than what's going on in Puerto Rico.
Sure.
So it is hard to have something that talks about everything. I think that's where we went down the line and starting to talk about things like, not unreasonable, but unreasonable expectations. So not every kid is going to get to go to Blue Beret training. Not every kid is going to get to go to IA. So those are the kinds of things that you have to be careful about doing. Yeah,
and again, in the other session, I do mention this, but a big thing about recruiting is you have to sell the program you have, not the program you want. And so if geographically your cadets are separated or your members are separated from certain activities, then you have to speak to the experience that they are going to have. And you can't sell pie in the sky. And if I say in a COVID world, it's fair to sell what you had before COVID-19, and with the goal that you're going to get back toward that. But yeah, just don't, you say that every cadet's going to go to Blue Beret or every cadet's going to do this or every member is going to do that.
Hi, we've got a few more questions that have come in.
Sure.
I have a cadet applicant who is 19 and autistic. I know he will have to join as a senior member, but I don't think this will be of interest to him. How can we ensure a positive experience for him?
So first of all, you're going to have an interview with that prospective member to find out what their interests are and make sure they understand that they're not joining as a cadet. Are they attracted to join as a cadet because of the cadet program? Because they're going to need to understand that won't be an option, but they could be involved with cadets. So yeah, you're going to have the conversation with them, and maybe if they have a parent that's still involved, as you say they're 19, so they're adult, but they may still have parental involvement. Have that conversation with them and find out what their interests are. And just so you know, being autistic is not at all a barrier to entry, and there's a whole bunch of other disabilities that people have that aren't a barrier to entry. We are the original organization that was founded by people who are 4F and weren't fit for military service. So we'll find a way to make it work.
Another question from the chat. Prospective cadets seem to be attracted to unique uniform items such as blue berets. Now that the Air Force members have moved on to OCP style uniforms, is there a possibility for CAP members who earn their berets from attending National Blue Beret to wear it with the ABUs at the squadrons? New members may join CAP for the berets, but may end up getting a whole lot more than a beret. Seems like a great recruiting tool.
Yeah. So yeah, you can't have a CAP session without a uniform question. And I don't know what the status is of, how that's going to transition and all that, but I can speak to this. Cadets love the bling, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to be motivated by bling and by things on your uniform and things that distinguish you from everybody else. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it may not work with the uniform regulations the way the Air Force wants them to be, or the way that Civil Air Patrol as a whole wants them to be. So as far as Blue Beret in particular, I don't know. What's interesting, on a complete side note, for those who weren't aware, I am the creator and maintainer of the McCord ribbon rack builder that a lot of people use to figure out how to wear their uniforms. And what I think is amazing to me, I can see the statistics on the backside. On the cadet rack builder, the most common rack that people build is a rack with every single award with the maximum number of attachments they can possibly have. That's done like literally 500 times a month on the cadet side, and it's only done like a few times on the senior member side. So cadets really do like the idea of that, and being able to show their achievement through the things that they can wear on the uniform. So that's an outward way to express that. So I just think it's kind of an interesting segue into that.
We've had a few questions about burnout from technology. Yesterday in your presentation, you talked about some different ways people can maintain the relationship and do things that are outside of normal technology. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share around that as
Well,
your experience?
Well, one thing is, I mean, obviously a lot of the country is still in the grips of a COVID crisis, and many people who are underemployed or unemployed are visiting food banks, and those food banks need help. And I know that the one squadron out here that I work with actually has 3 different missions going on right now in support of that. And that gives members an opportunity to do something face-to-face and help their community. It's not just on a virtual screen. And obviously, a lot of safety protocols are involved with that, as I've participated in many hours in that myself. So those are opportunities, and other opportunities are just working on things that, again, they're kind of tech related, but you can kind of get prepared. We've got myself and another member, we're putting together rocketry kits to distribute to cadets. They're going to come by and pick them up kind of in a drive-through, like, here's your rocket kit, and then go home, and then we'll do the video online, and as they build the rockets and get set to fly them. So, again, you got to be creative and think outside the box. There are ways to improve the experience we're having, and there's ways to keep members engaged. We just have to find those.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Certainly. All right. Well, I think we're getting close to our time. Are there any other last minute questions? If not, we will call it a day, and thank everybody for joining us. And we'll put it in the chat. So if you want to stay here after we finish this, the chat will stay running for a while. I will go ahead and put my email address in there, and feel free to ping myself and Captain Lester, if you want to do the same, that's fine. Then feel free to reach out to us about anything, and we'll get back to you. And with that, I'll bid everybody adieu. Thank you all.